Hey everybody, it's me, Chandler, Poling, aka Torrin LA, Vice President of Qweerty Gamers. We are back with another Q&A series, and I'm really excited about this topic because it has to deal with all of you. Everybody that is in the gaming community is very interested in community management. So today I have two incredible women to talk about what it's like to work with community and be community managers. So please help me in welcoming Kay Purcell and Kate Sanchez.
Hello.
Applause noise, applause noise. Welcome. All right, yeah, snaps. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out and telling our community all about what you guys do.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I'm super excited to be here.
Great, I'm glad. Now, Kay, why don't you kick us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and kind of what led you to your position in community management.
Yeah, certainly. So I kind of have one of those like fairy tale stories of how I came to work in the gaming industry. I actually began wanting to be a comic book artist and spent a lot of time writing comics, drawing comics, and actually scored a gig as a professional colorist and scored a cover gig and quickly retired because comics is really hard work, y'all. But that led me to a weird little gray-green website known as DeviantArt. I don't know, some of you might have heard of it. It's kind of like Fight Club. If you know about it, you don't talk about it kind of thing. And I actually worked my way up there. I was a volunteer moderator and eventually became core staff and senior community manager and led the moderation team there for many years before I moved on and started pursuing games more seriously, became lead editor at Gaming Trend, which I still do. And I'm now, at least till the end of the month, community manager at Redbull Gaming. So yeah, I've had kind of a whirlwind, rags to riches kind of story.
I love that. I love that you came through comic books. We'll get into that later. Kate, tell us, give us your life story. Where did you start out and how have you gotten here?
Oh dear, nobody has that much time. I've had a really windy road. So I was actually in a PhD program. That program was awful. I decided I wanted to do a podcast because I loved research still, and my master's is in pop culture and society and how it informs how we form identity. So I've kind of always taken pop culture seriously. So I started a podcast. We did that for about a year, and then on a January night, it was January 1st, and it just turned midnight, and I was like, what if we started a website? And we branched our podcast into a community. We put out call for writers. We had a lot of community members join, and that's how But Why Tho Geek Community started. And now we're almost 30 writers strong. We have about 9 podcasts in our network. I'm the editor-in-chief over there, co-founder, and our entire thing is making sure that we're representing pop culture from anime and movies and TV and manga and comic books and book books and of course gaming. But we're doing it by focusing on uplifting marginalized folks. I mean, obviously I'm a brown woman myself, so we've always put community first, building a safe community first, and then my job is that I work in D&I as a research analyst and strategist. So I've been able to bring a lot of my real life into, well, I guess, yeah, my site's my real life too, but kind of melding the two and leading our community that way.
I love that. That's awesome. I love how you guys both also work within the media world as well. It's very interesting to kind of that you guys both have a background in journalism, so to speak, or media and pop culture, and that you also work in community. So let's start with Kay. Talk about the role of community manager for those who maybe have never even heard the term, because for me, I never even knew that that was like a job until I started joining things on Twitch, and then I learned about community management. So give us the rundown, the 101.
Yeah. So community management, and I think Kate will back me up here, is kind of like still the Wild West, right? Community management can mean a million things. In fact, if I'm interviewing for positions for community manager, one of the first things I ask is, what is community management for your company? Because for some, it's basically like, it's social media, basically. They want you to hang out on Twitter and put off memes and make things go viral. And never ask a community manager or social media manager to make something go viral. We can't do it. We're not Superman, okay? Like, we can't do it. You will cause gray hairs to spring with that request. But community management has a lot of different titles with it. There's community development too, which is kind of more what I lean towards. It's often seeing around the corner. It's anticipating things that are going to happen. It's building plans and guide bars about how you're going to react when things change, anticipating how things are going to change, anticipating how the community is going to react to things you put forward. It's also, especially in gaming, working very closely with your developers, taking the feedback that the community gives, which is often, look, I love y'all, but sometimes, especially when you're really passionate about a thing, you can be a little harsh. And sometimes you got to translate that really harsh, like, we always joke that you can tell how much someone loves a Star Wars, how big a Star Wars fan is by how much they hated the prequel trilogy. You know, that love and hate kind of walks that little back circle of emotion, and it can jump really quickly from one to the other. So a lot of it is interpreting like what people really like, what they really don't like, and what they feel versus what they're saying, because people don't often say what they mean. They don't even know what they mean. They just know they're mad, and so they're lashing out at what they mean. So it's a whole lot of soft skills. It's a lot of marketing and comms. It's a lot of social media. And it's just a lot of like, and a very like base skill understanding people and being able to anticipate people. That's a very broad way to describe it, but there we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's great to even hear it in the broad terms, because as you kind of outlined, there's a lot of elements that go into community management. Like, it's not just social media. And so, Kate, what's your experience with community? I mean, you said you're not a community manager at the moment, but I'm sure you deal with community and fan reaction and everything all the time.
Yeah, so that's one of the things is my husband and I we don't have a dedicated community manager for our community. We're kind of the community managers by default, so running a lot of the social media. But for us, the big part of our community is because we're majority marginalized folks, the majority of our staff is BIPOC, we have to anticipate what certain pieces may draw attention from the wrong folks. We have to essentially, like, if something posts, okay, this is going up on this day, we need all our mods in Discord organized. We need to make sure that we're watching social media. And at the end of the day, our community is twofold. So my first job is to protect my writers. When something publishes on our site, I am their guard dog and I will take care of them because I chose to publish it. And the other side of that is protecting our community and the people that are within it, which is where all the moderation of the Discord and the talking there comes into hand. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that when you are a part of a marginalized community, you kind of have to think about the worst things first and build for them. And so a lot of our community management style and the building of our community was, one, making sure that we were encouraging growth within it, but also making sure that we were keeping the right things growing and keeping the wrong things out. So that's where a lot of our work has been, is just making sure that we're really cognizant of the landscape. Like, unfortunately, we know all the names of the people that you shouldn't interact with on Twitter, and we know all the names of the people that you should lock down if they catch wind of things. And it's a tough spot, but like Kay said, you just have to be aware of what will happen, and you have to build for those things. And sometimes it gets a little sad building for those things, but then you actually get to see your community thrive, and it really pays off.
And building off what she said, it's better to be proactive. Like, a lot of community management, especially for smaller and newer companies that aren't as experienced, becomes very reactive. And it's so much better to anticipate the worst, build against it, and that way you're prepared and your community can be happier and safer and grow better.
Yeah, so obviously building safe spaces is something that you hear a lot. A lot of streamers will say this is a safe space, you know, no hate speech, whatever, in their chat rules. So talk about building a safe space. Of course, there's one intention of wanting it, but then what are the actual actions in order to do it?
Kate, this is your area of expertise. You go.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we've done is not only making sure that we have a zero tolerance policy for all of those things, but if somebody feels comfortable enough to voice that type of thing within our community, we ask ourselves why. How did we allow that? It could be one incident. We haven't had a lot of them, thankfully. But if it was one incident, we ask, what did we do that made that person feel comfortable to share that very not good thing? And we react to it, which I think a lot of people don't realize is that if your community isn't diverse, there's a reason why. People are seeing you as a place where they can't go to, and you kind of need to step back and assess yourself. And I think what a lot of people do is they think just putting the zero tolerance policy that covers it. No, there's a lot that goes into it, especially when you look at the way that people subjectively deal with each other. So while I may think that something isn't offensive, somebody in my community may, and it's being able to understand the languages that everybody speaks and understand where they're coming from, at least like leading with empathy first and responding in that way, and then addressing the situation, and then making sure that you're doing your work to let people feel like they can come and talk to you. They know who your mods are. They know who can talk. They know who they can tag into a situation. A lot of my husband's way more online than I am. He's the co-founder of our site. He runs a lot. All the back end stuff is all him. So he's always constantly on Discord. And so people know that they can at him, and he'll kind of come in, monitor the situation. And then usually I'm the one who will come in and kind of lay down the hammer of justice when need be, because I'm a little louder. But what people miss when they just put their chat rules, I always think it's funny. Everybody has "don't be a dick" in their chat rules, and I'm like, okay,
Right.
but how are you ensuring that nobody is a dick? Because it goes beyond just a post. It goes into how people are treating each other on a daily basis, how they're interacting in new community events, how they're interacting on social media and with each other. And it gets tiring because you kind of have to be aware of all of that. You have to know who is in your community. But at the same time, it's what you need to do. And I have the luxury of being a smaller brand where it is a lot easier for us to kind of like, and we have over 400 people on our Discord, so I'm not friends with all of them on Twitter, but the most active ones, I try to make sure that I'm following them back. I'm seeing what they're posting. I'm seeing what kind of person they are. And I'm able to do that because we are small, but it's more so that I understand who I am inviting into my community and who I am helping grow within it. And if you don't start looking there, or you're not aware of some of the people that are like leaders or the most active, you can't actively encourage the type of space that you want to build. And Kay can probably speak to the larger community sizes. I know mine is a little, we're really hands-on, but we have the luxury of being, but we did have to scale up from, I think we're at 5 mods now. It's not just me and my husband, and it was just us for a long time. And now we finally have some help. So that's good. But just teaching everybody how to be that way too. And also understanding that I think the thing that gets missed a lot of the time is, how do I explain it? When you interact with somebody in an official capacity, when you're a brand, you have the weight of shining a light on them, and that can be positive, that can be negative, and it could be just how the people who are reading it take it. And you have to be cognizant of your interactions there, because you never want to open your community members up to a troll fest, which happens a lot when brands like to interact with things. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question. Did I answer the question? I feel like I rambled.
No, you see what you're doing is you're building up a great narrative about building a community for gamers or for fans or for whatnot. And I think that's obviously important and part of the discussion. I want to turn it to Kay to talk about those who are in game development that want to deal with community on the inside, like planning for that. You're building a game, you're building your channels, your social channels, whatever you are doing. And how do you not do crisis management, but rather pre-plan and be prepared? And before you answer your question, just chat. By the way, if you have any questions for these two amazing panelists, please put it in the chat, put a little heart before your question. I'll see it. I'm monitoring chat. So if you guys have any questions for them, please jump in. Okay, Kay.
Yeah. So actually one of the more challenging parts of working with a brand, especially if you are, either you are a brand or you're taking on the mantle of community management for a brand, you actually have to make sure that the leadership of the brand is on board with the community you want to build. Because actually it's fairly challenging to, especially if it's a business, of like, hey, let's say this big streamer who we all love right now offers to work with you and you have a chance to work with this. It's going to be amazing for your brand. But 2 days before this thing's going to go live, money's already been spent, checks have been signed. That person does something really bad, right? Are you willing to not air that content, right? Are you willing to break that partnership at a loss in order to avoid putting that into your community? I've been really fortunate in that I have worked with brands who have said, yes, that's it. We wouldn't do it. And they've stood by that. But you as the community manager don't actually get to make that decision. That is a decision of leadership, of marketing, of brand, of all these different factors. And sometimes it's a straight up factor of like, this is investment. And if we don't make good on this investment, the company might fold. These are often positions that smaller companies can get put in. So it is figuring, a lot of times it is asking the leadership these hard questions, figuring out where you are, and then kind of being able to plan, again, thinking of the best case of like, okay, if this happens, they wouldn't do it. We can come out and say like, hey, we know we said this was coming with this person. They did this thing. We pulled out. We're not dealing with them anymore because this is not what we as a brand represent. And that's a really good feeling. But then you also have to, prepare for comes on the other side. Everything's been cleared, everything's going up. It's going to happen. This thing is going to run regardless of that this person did a bad thing. How do you as a community manager message that to your community and say like, hey, this doesn't represent, like, this has already happened. This was in the books. You understand, we hope you understand that this is money that has been spent. It's been done. There's no taking it back. This is running. It doesn't represent us as a core, and we're not going to work with this person again going forward. Right. So a lot of that, there's a lot of setup even around the language when you're setting up your Discord. Are you going to put up pronoun tags, which seems like a very simple thing, but also people will come in and troll you simply for having pronoun tags. So you have to be prepared, for how to combat that. Also, honestly, a lot of community management I have found is internal education. Especially through 2020, we've found a lot of people, especially, people who are not minorities and who are male, are discovering like things that I didn't think were an issue are a big issue. And a lot of times they feel frustrated and attacked because they don't understand. They go and ask for help. And especially if they like ask on Twitter, they get dogpiled, right? So this is why, allies, this is why even if you are straight, even if you're white, even if you're cis, whatever it is, if you don't fall in that box, this is why we really need allies. This is why we really need people who are of the majority status to tell these stories, because sometimes it's easier to hear it from someone that looks like you, who shares your experiences. And often it's just educating the people who are in leadership or who are in higher management to say like, this is why we can't do this. This is why doing it this way is important. This is why this kind of language is important. And no, it's not in your realm of experience. It's not in my realm of experience either, but this is why doing it this way is really important.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback on that, what we've done in our Discord, we've probably created more channels than we needed to, but we did it with a purpose. So we actually have a 2020 current events channel that was originally the COVID channel so that everybody could talk about COVID together. And then everything else started happening. And one of the things that we installed was we saw everybody talking. People didn't know how to talk, and people wanted to talk about a lot of the violence that was happening, a lot of the police brutality that was being shared. And because we are a community that felt that trauma and that pain very hard because of our makeup, we wanted to provide a safe space for people to unpack that, but we also wanted to provide a space for people to learn. So we moved all that into the 2020 current events channel, but we also made sure, and we ended up writing a giant paragraph. Like when we change this, we put it in general and we put it in that community, in that events channel. If you post something that has violent imagery and showcases brutality, you need to spoiler mark it, and there cannot be that image where somebody will just stumble onto that. And so it was setting that groundwork of what we expected within our community. Like, yes, we want to have these hard conversations with you, but you need to understand that we are all internalizing this trauma differently. So you must act accordingly. And thankfully, everybody really, it resonated with everybody. We didn't have any issues at all, but it was anticipating what could happen if we just said, oh yeah, everybody post the videos you find on Twitter in here. It was like, okay, no, let's dial this back real quick. Yes, you can do that, but here are some ground rules first. And we've been able to mitigate it really well. And every now and again, we have people come into, a general chat and drop stuff like, hey, migrate that over there, especially with the election cycle, all the things going on in our country. And it's just understanding that like we are going to set the boundaries for our community and being reactive to what that community wants to do right there. And we always and I think it's because of my D&I background. Like I'm always the person who is there to help answer questions about things. Like we've had some tough questions about Black Lives Matter. We've had questions about immigration, and I've kind of like stepped into that role of being like, okay, let's talk about it. Let me unpack this for you. And so I'm really happy that we've been able to kind of create that space. But it's a lot of what Kay said. Like you have to like find ways to have those conversations and set the ground to do them.
And you also have to decide, especially when you're representing a brand or a company, is that conversations you're willing to have? Because that might actually not be in the best interest of your community. It might be in the best interest of humanity at large, but that might not be in the best interest of your, the community that you're building for this brand, for your job. So like with my personal stream, I identify as asexual, and I actually spend a large amount of time talking about what that means and explaining that to people. But also a lot of it is judging the people you're talking to, right? I don't want to spend time talking to a troll about, what I do and don't do in my personal time. I have a really, really amazing viewer who comes by almost every stream and has really had no exposure to any of this, and is very, very blunt in his communication, and will ask very harsh questions, but from a very good place, and is actually eager to learn. And because I'm a small, it's a small stream and it's something I'm open about, I'm comfortable discussing that with and helping educate. But that's not always the best thing for your community. And you really have to figure out, what is your space? What are you using it for? And who are you spending your time on? Because sometimes someone you could potentially, I've run into situations, some of the hardest lessons I've had in my community management career was I was trying really hard to help an individual understand the rules, abide by the rules, and they were mentally unwell, and took my personal attention I gave them as attacking them, and actually contacted my manager and accused me of trying to cause them to self-harm. And so community management is often seen as a very entry-level, easy position. It is very challenging. You're dealing with a lot of people. You're dealing with events in real time. Often you don't have time to ask a manager. You have to react to a situation. So it is one of the most rewarding things you can do. It is one of the best ways to learn about yourself and learn about humanity. But it is a challenging and fascinating job.
Wow. Yeah. Well, since we're here about the topic is community, I'm going to say hi to some of our new followers that have joined us since we started this stream. Welcome, Dell214. Welcome, Derpy. And welcome, Snow Owl 549. And I am Tuesday. We just got a bunch of a swirl of new followers. We really appreciate you guys joining us on the stream. Thank you so much. We have one question in chat. Our first one says, what is the best way to build the brand with a competing brand in the same market?
Like together or?
Well, I guess the way I interpret the question is like, say you are working with a brand and there is a competing brand in the market. How do you make yourself stand out to the community? You know, like how, I know it's an open question as far as there's so many ways to tackle that, but what's your take on, like, if there's another community of Kate, this is directed to you, another community of of the people of color that are building a gaming community, but you're building your own. Obviously you're being very supportive, but you want to make yourself individual. So how do you do that?
So one of the things that we do is we highlight all the people that work for us. So and one of the things that we realized really early on, actually this is now that I think about it, it's a really good question. So when we were building up But Why Tho, we looked at what a lot of other sites were getting critiqued for. We looked at what a lot of sites, what we didn't like from a lot of the sites. And one of the things we decided very early on was that everybody who wrote for us was going to have credits on their page. They were going to have an about them on our staff, and we were going to do what we could to uplift them and highlight them no matter what, which means every time they post something, they are tagged in it. Every time there is a situation where they need a boost, we boost them, all that kind of stuff. And the reason that separates us from, or the reason that we see that as an element that separates us from other people is because that is something that a lot of sites, as they grow larger, they lose that community aspect. So for us, it was like, well, what is the number one goal that we want people to come to us for? And so that was community. Whereas another site, like if you look at somebody like maybe say, Geeks of Color, which is a phenomenal website. They're very much news, reviews. This is a site. So when we were building out what we were going to be, we were going to be a community first. And so that's very much driven all of the way that we have marketed ourselves. I run our site's Twitter, and then we have somebody who runs our Facebook and our Instagram. And we all work together to make sure that whenever we brand ourselves, that is what we're doing first and foremost. And when you take that a step further, for us, it was important to differentiate ourselves and not get pigeonholed into just being, oh, those are the marginalized folks that do stuff. Like we'll send them things when we need some brown folks to talk about this thing. And so for us, we wanted to make sure that none of our writers felt pigeonholed into only talking about their identities, or that brands only wanted to come work with us during certain months. And so for us, it was always, we are a community of writers and podcasters who cover pop culture, who offer pop culture critique, but we also do it from a marginalized perspective as well. So uplifting instead of just making sure that everybody is only put into that. Because if you look at a lot of other sites that run with diversity first, it's very much only posting about identity issues, which is fine and like totally okay if that's what you want to do. But for me, that was my biggest struggle, especially coming out of academia, was getting pigeonholed into that. And I know a lot of critics who also feel like, oh, well, I only get hired when I'm doing freelance, when I'm reviewing a movie that's about, Latinas, and there are not a lot of those out there. So it's giving people the chance to use their voices how they want to and making sure that we're supporting them in that way. I hope that answers.
No, I think it definitely does. We have a shout out, by the way, from I Am 2Z. They say 100%. The industry needs to stop seeing community roles as entry level, as they are far from it. They come from extreme levels of responsibility, curation, and more. So the chat is definitely listening to you guys and agreeing with what you say. Next question from chat from
could I real quick do from a brand point of view?
Yes.
If you're representing a brand, if you're sitting down and like, there's this game and we're competing against this game, and how do we differentiate ourselves? It's partially brand values, right? But it's also, you really need to sit down with, if you have a platform team or a social media team, work with them, work with your marketing, work with your brand, figure out what is your brand voice. A cheat that I like to use is figure out a character, usually cartoon character, that represents what you would say. right? So if you're trying to write something, if you're trying to come up with an idea and it sounds like something that cartoon character would do. So like if it's Sonic the Hedgehog, it's going to be kind of like snarky and like a little bit cocky, right? Or is it going to be more of a Fluttershy where it's, oh, hi, for a more soft spoken, right? You need to figure out what's your brand voice. That's going to help you send consistent messaging, and it's going to help you decide what events are you going to put out, how are you going to talk about those events, how are you promoting people, are you a brand that talks a little smack, or are you wholesomely painfully positive? So that's a way to start thinking about how do you differentiate yourself, and that's going to attract different audiences.
Yeah, I love that. That's very, very wise words, especially as a company owner myself. We have our own social media platforms, which we tagged you guys on earlier today. And I think social media voice is super important. I do want to catch this other question in chat, and then I want to get into social media and Discord. But this question says, do you yourselves ever find it hard being a leader and a member of your community? Is it hard to wear both hats and still be respected by your communities?
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. We had to deal with a really hard falling out with a member of our community who we found out was being fairly toxic, and it was one of those things where it was hard to I was also hurt in it, so I had to find a way to both lead my community through it while also kind of like shouldering my own, kind of issues with that interpersonal struggle. And so every now and again, I think the hardest part is like sometimes I just want to breathe, and I have to find moments to, otherwise I get stuck. Because you have to learn when to take the hat off, like just for a second. But what I've learned is being, at least for me, like within my small community, is being really open, like, hey guys, I'm not okay right now. I'm going to pass the baton on to, this person. They're going to be leading the ship for a little bit. If you need me, I'll be here, but let me detach for a little bit, and trying to like understand that I'm setting my boundaries, which I think is something that community managers have to do and people working in community have to do. Because the issue that happened in that situation was I let my boundaries be eroded to a point where I was always on call. I was always putting my mental health second to theirs, and I didn't realize the pattern of behavior that they had been creating with myself and others. And so now what I'm working really hard on, I'm encouraging a lot of people in my community and a lot of people that I'm working with, is just like, this is your boundary. You deserve this boundary and you can set it. And kind of like reassuring myself, but also reassuring the people within us. Like, you don't always have to talk about something if you don't feel comfortable doing it. I think a lot of the times we have to give ourselves that grace to be able to step back. But the answer is yes. Oh my gosh, it's hard a lot of the time.
I know so many community managers who have like their incognito accounts within the community, so that they can just post a meme and it not be, why are you posting memes? Why aren't you building new skins or building new levels? It's like, I don't do that. I'm not part of that team. Don't you understand that like it's two different people that do this? But yeah, there's a lot of challenges. In fact, I've had a couple when I've applied for different jobs at community managers. They're like, but you're not very active in all these different communities. And I'm like, no, because I don't have anything to add to these communities. I don't want to go out and like argue with people because I argue with people for a living. I don't need to do that. Finding that balance of connecting with the community, having the official mod voice, and but then also being part of it it's hard. It's amazing when you do it right, and usually the best way I have found to do that is to kind of identify, I don't want to say community leaders or community icons are great because you can use them to help spread the word, and usually those are kind of the more level-headed. They will give you honest feedback. They're not going to freak out. But also that can be seen as elitism, right? These mods only hang out with these people. The flip side, when I worked at DeviantArt, you know, I would finish work and be like, great, I'm just going to go browse and find some awesome art and comment on art that makes me happy. And people would be like, why are you commenting? You should be deleting violations.
Yeah.
So it's very hard, and how you do it absolutely depends on the community, depends on your setup. But those little incognito accounts, man, they'll help your sanity. So you can just be a normal person and celebrate and post memes without, you know, doing it under an official voice. And as Kate said earlier, oftentimes you can post something and people will screen cap it and take it completely out of context, and suddenly you're the bad guy. You know, you said something that you absolutely did not mean. It's in no way could be seen that way if you read the comment thread, but no one's going to read the comment thread. They're going to read the one line screenshot. Yeah. So it's a challenge.
Yeah. So and I would say, sorry, I was going to tag on, like, one of the things that, like, I think is unique for us too is we run our writing community within our larger community. So I can be like really stern editor in our writers chat, and then I'm like, here's this meme in our posting chat. And it's hard sometimes to like separate those hats. Luckily, my writers have been really, really amazing and giving me that time to separate them, but it's always kind of like, oh, these are the same thing sometimes.
It's even worse when you post a meme just to be funny and someone takes it as like a personal attack, or they're like, did you post that because I did that? You're like, no, it's just funny. It's just
yep, that happens a lot. That is, it makes my heart break every time.
Yeah, so let's talk about social media platforms, especially Discord, because obviously Discord is a big platform for a lot of communities. But you mentioned Twitter earlier, obviously Facebook and Instagram, there's so many platforms out there. Reddit? What are some of the platforms that you recommend for finding a community if somebody's looking to find their people? And what platforms would you recommend and how to use them if you are a brand or a streamer or anything like this that you want to connect with community?
Hey, do you want to go first? Do you want me to take this one first?
You go first.
Okay.
Yeah.
As I take a sip of my tea. So honestly, and I recognize that pretty much every answer we've given has not been this is right and this is wrong, but that's because it's community and everything is different. And the answer that's right today can be wrong tomorrow and then right again the next day. But you really need to look at what your goals are, right? So Discord is usually a great platform for if you're a streamer and you're trying to build a community, anything where you're really trying to like draw people in, because your Discord is usually going to be really dedicated, right? They're going to be active. It's also very much a 24/7 platform. And if you don't have someone who can, you know, and I don't mean one person who can be there 24 hours a day, because that is not feasible. Do not do that. If you don't have multiple people spread out across time zones who can be available, you know, you probably don't want a Discord, because it takes very little for a Discord to be destroyed by just a very small group of dedicated trolls. Reddit is a great way to build ideas. Reddit and Imgur, if you do them correctly. I know everyone says Imager. It's actually pronounced Imgur.
My mind's blown today.
Wow.
That kind of hurts.
I know. But those are very hard to use as a brand. However, if you use them correctly, if you can, you know, actually as a brand, especially with Reddit, you need to take the time to go in, invest in the community spaces. So, you know, if you are trying to build a name as a person who plays FPSs, go find some really cool active FPS forums, interact. You know, when one of my friends, amazing Anjali, you're amazing. When Anjali was starting to make fandom tea, you know, one of the things we suggested was let's find some tea forums. Let's start some tea Reddits. Let's talk about tea. Let's get involved. And then when she came out with, hey, I'm making my own tea now. Everyone was excited because she was already part of that community and they wanted to celebrate her and upvote her. Whereas if she just come in for the first time and said, I made tea, people are going to be like, that's self-promotion, get out. So that is a pretty heavy investment in a different way than Discord's a heavy investment. Twitter is a great way to like put out the word, but it's got some of the lowest click-through out there. It's Twitter, Reddit, and Imgur. Like, if you put that through, it's going to like, there's a small chance it can go viral. And when it goes viral, it's amazing. But that chance it's going to go viral is so small. You're really, not that they're bad investments, but it's a little bit of a gamble that can pay off over time, but probably not going to be real quick. Actually, one of the best ways, if you are a brand or a small game that is trying to get the word out, build an email list. That's the best way to get click-throughs, is through an email list. And from that email, then you can push them cool things. What are you doing? Push them eventually to your Reddit, not to your Reddit, to your Discord, to your Twitter, and kind of build up your follower that way. You're going to get the biggest click-through when it comes to email. So yeah, you really need to look at what are your goals. What kind of investment are you able to make? If it's, a couple posts a week, maybe look at Reddit or Twitter. If you have the manpower to monitor a Discord pretty much 24/7, yeah, do a Discord. Got to look at your circumstance and your manpower.
Yeah, that's the same answer I have, is where is your community at? Like you have to kind of meet the community that you want to be a part of, or you want to like iterate on, because it's really easy. I want to be the first. Yeah. But it's the internet, so you're probably not the first. So an easy thing to do is to not work hard, but to work smart and look at how other people are doing. Are they making dedicated hashtags and running that through Twitter, and then they're joining up around that one hashtag? Join the communities that you enjoy and you'd like to work with in the future. Ask them questions, see what they're doing. On our end, our main source of interaction is Discord and Twitter. We've been building out our Instagram. Instagram is really finicky when it comes to growth, like real finicky. That's probably been our hardest platform to grow. We're on Pinterest, which surprisingly does extremely well for things like comic books, since it's very image driven, but you don't get a lot of interaction in the form of community building. You just get shares. And then Reddit has been something that like, I think Reddit gets a really, really bad rap, especially from people who are so localized on Twitter. I've learned Reddit is actually a really beautiful place for conversation and discussion, and not just putting something into a 280 letter tweet. But like Kay said, you can't really build a brand on there because of all the self-promotion limits. I would say our highest conversion rates and like our biggest wins on a social media platform come from Reddit. If we can have something organically get put on Reddit, it will take off and we will actually see those click conversions coming in. Twitter is our lowest, which is always the disheartening thing. Like we'll have an article get shared 100 times and we got like maybe 20 clicks from it, is like the easiest way to do it. But what Twitter has shown is it's a really good organizing tool. So if you're building your community and you're trying to really grow those interactions and make yourself accessible, that Twitter has been our space to do that. So like answering questions, responding to DMs, and then trying to find other communities. That's kind of been the public facing. And then when we made our Discord, we kind of took cues from the streamer community in that we wanted people to play games together. We wanted to do stuff together with other people. And so that's how we built our Discord. And now our Discord has actually turned into like its own ecosystem. Everybody plugs their own stuff in the dedicated channels. We have happy hours now. At the start of COVID, we actually started community event watch parties, and it's been something that has just continued to now. Well, because one, pandemic still happening, even if you're over it. And we've kind of used this space as a way to listen to our community and give them what they need. So like Twitter is kind of like the place where we listen to people, and Discord is where we enact those requests essentially. So we kind of use those two in tandem. And then Facebook is just there because it's a number and everybody asks for Facebook numbers. So it's there. Although Facebook groups actually do have a really good I'm in a few Facebook group communities where it is a really good way to find people and interact with them and share content in a similar way to Reddit. That being said, it's really hard, like Reddit, to go in there as a brand. And then it's even harder to start your own and convert all of your page likes into group membership and interaction. So usually if you're building something, and I know a few communities that have group numbers in the thousands now, but they started by just building a group and growing that group and not dedicating time into building their page. So like Kay said, it's really about like where your people are and what you want to do. Like any platform that you're going to, you have to have a goal. You can't just tweet into the void, because then you're just relying on something to pop off and you're not actually building an active strategy. The other thing is, if you're a brand or somebody who wants to be an influencer, responding to other companies' tweets is like the best way to actually boost your engagement and to boost your interaction and impression numbers, especially if you're within that first batch of like 100 and you can get the company to respond. Like from a brand marketing perspective, like Twitter's really good when you're interacting with larger brand accounts.
That's great advice.
Also too, especially if you're building a brand from nothing, unless you're Fall Guys, unless you're Cyberpunk, you can't just put it out there and wait. You have to go and find what you have to, work with your marketing, and figure out who are you marketing this to? Who are the people who are most likely to like this thing? Then, okay, where are they? What do they do? What do they like? And going to where they are to get their attention is really important, because the internet's too big now. Social media takes all of our attention. You can't just tweet something out and wait for it to happen. You have to go where they are and kind of demand their attention.
Yeah. And sometimes it may feel like you're copying, but no, find successful people in the community that you're trying to do. Make a list of all the hashtags that they're using when they post something on Instagram or when they post something on Twitter. Look through their follows. Who are they following? Who follows them? And like use that to kind of gauge where you want to move your community. And sometimes like it can feel artificial, but you're doing that with a purpose, because you need to have some sort of foundation for a community to grow around you organically.
I love this discussion. I'm sorry that we're reaching the end of it. My last question for you guys. Well, first of all, before I get to my last question, congratulations on your Game Her Award nominations. Kay is nominated for AAA Community Manager of the Year, and Kate is nominated for Best Gaming Community and Most Inclusive Team.
Thank you.
Guys, why don't you just quickly just say what are the Game Her Awards and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so the Game Hers is a virtual and in-person community, and it connects all women gamers and those who identify as female and non-binary together in the industry to build out a space that highlights them. So they have a blog series, they do podcasts, they just find ways to highlight, I guess, like to highlight femme-coded individuals in the community, because a lot of the times it is very hard to get a leg up on there. And one of the things that I really appreciated is when I was looking through the Game Her like nominees and awards, it was extremely diverse. And I can't tell you how many times I'm the only brown woman in the room. So to be nominated with a whole bunch of diverse communities, and not even just in the inclusive team category, just across the spectrum of the awards, it's been really amazing. Because I was actually one of the first people to interview the founders at PAX South 2020, because that was their first appearance. And they had just made their Twitter account and they had just gotten started, and getting to talk to them and seeing how much they've grown and seeing how much the community has grown around them has been really amazing to watch. So to be included, and to honestly, sometimes like it gets really hard to realize that you've built something, especially because like community a lot of the time is something that's really amorphous. And so when you get nominated and then you get to finalist, it's kind of like that certification that you've done something right, because like that little imposter syndrome will just consistently tell you that like you're not doing enough, you're not succeeding. But it's just nice to have the recognition, which I don't want to sound like patting myself on the back, but it's just I love the community that we've built over the past 2 years, and so to see that enough people liked it too, that makes my heart like grow 3 sizes bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, women are underrepresented in the gaming space. And so it's really, really neat to, see the celebration of women and female coded individuals, female identifying individuals, and kind of making our mark as, community management, social media is often a female domain anyway. It is a lot of soft skills, which we excel at. But to see, celebrating female coded streamers, to see celebration of devs, who are women, and especially who are women of color, is just amazing. So it's great to be a part of it.
And it shows that we're everywhere.
We are.
Like, we're in every title that you can find, and a lot of the times we just get overlooked. So it's really nice to have that.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, congratulations again. All right. So my last question for you guys, on our tech check, we talked about our love of X-Men. Who is your favorite X-Men character?
Oh, that's not fair.
You
can do top 5 if you need to.
I can go because she's been my favorite since I was little, and it's Rogue. And it is not because I'm basic. It's because there's something that's always intrigued me about wanting to be close to everybody around you, but literally not being able to do that. And that's something that like I've always dealt with, of like, I seem really personable, but I'm actually really introverted, and I don't talk to people unless they talk to me. I've been through a lot in my life, so it makes it very hard to open up, even though I like desperately want to sometimes. So Rogue has always been the character to me that really just resonates, because she always finds that strength, even when it's really, really hard. And also her and Gambit. Come on now.
Yeah. Gosh, I have a really hard time. There's a meme going around right now that's like, what's your type of character, right? And I'm like, I like edgelords and cinnamon buns, and like basically nothing in between, right? The edgier or the sweeter, the better. And I tend to like a lot of really obscure characters. So like Pete Wisdom is one of my favorite X-Men, and no one knows who he is, but he's like the most jaded black air spy who like chain smokes and wears a suit. He insists on wearing a suit, but it's always rumpled. And I just find him this really, really fascinating character. I love Multiple Man more than anything, especially in the early days of X Factor investigations. I've been shipping Richter and Shatterstar since 1996, and they finally became canon in 2006. And then one of my favorites is I love all the ferals. Wild Child is one of my favorite. Wolvie and Sabretooth, but I love Nightcrawler because I grew up in a really, really religious space that didn't have any room for any of the things that I loved. In fact, I was told I wasn't allowed to bring my comics to school because Nightcrawler was a demon. And I spent so long trying to explain that no, like he's one of us. And I think that's why I love the X-Men. Is I grew up, in a space where I didn't belong, and I knew I was special, but nothing that made me special let me fit in that space. And I knew that even if it was just in a comic book, there were people who felt like I did. So it's hard.
I love it. And my favorite obviously is Kitty Pryde.
Kitty Pryde. Who dated Pete Wisdom.
Yes, exactly. I know who Pete Wisdom is.
Yeah.
Well,
got a thing for Pete's.
Before I let you guys go, I just want to talk to chat for a second. I hope you guys really enjoyed this Q&A. If you would like this and other Q&As, please let us know if there's any sort of topics that you want us to address, any people you want us to talk to. We love feedback. Hit us up on Discord, on Twitter, on all the channels that we've already talked about. So our Qweerty community, please let us know. Also, don't go anywhere. As soon as we're done here, our Qweerty member Chris is going to be streaming tonight, so stay in the chat, stay on the channel, and you guys will see him. And please help me in thanking Purcell and Kate Sanchez. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me,
you guys. This was awesome.
Absolutely.
This was great. I hope we gave you some insight and didn't just overwhelm you.
Yep.
Great. Well, we're gonna pause here, and David's gonna sign us out. So thank you so much.
Thank you.